I just realized that this podcast thing does a countdown, which I think is even more
It's
intimidating.
it's like your heart starts racing.
That's not good. Anyway, hi everybody, and hi Lindsay. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for
Hi.
having me, Sam. I appreciate it.
I'm just excited that with both of our busy schedules, we were finally able to record a Scale Without Chaos
Yes.
podcast.
Yeah, it's
So
been weeks of trying.
and it's so funny because it's like we really were trying, and it's just all of these crazy things come into play, and it's
Mhm.
it's just life. So
We've made it. That's
finally,
what matters.
yes, finally summer happened, and things actually calmed down enough for us to be able to chat, which I'm excited about this topic. One that I know you feel very passionate about, and one that I have a hard time being biased about. So or unbiased about. I am biased about it. So we'll dive into it and see how this goes.
Yeah,
I think
great.
we might say some polarizing things. We'll see.
Well,
We'll
let's
see.
let's do it. I love doing that. Very direct to
Let's-
the point. Like let's get this going. Let's have an honest conversation.
I like it. That's perfect. So welcome everyone to the Scale Without Chaos podcast. This is a podcast for business leaders who want to scale and not do it the hard way. I'm Samantha Riel. I am the host, and I am a former CMO, current business strategist, and I've seen the inside of enough businesses to know when people are really doing a lot more work than they need to be able to grow and scale their companies. All right, so I'm so excited today to have Lindsey Williams here with me. She is the Vice President of Marketing and Communications for Shoals Technology Group. I got it, finally. There's might be a few outtakes in here later,
Nice work.
but
I'm proud of
it's
you.
the
Yes.
thank
Thank
you.
you
It's
for
the
having me. I'm very excited for this.
thank you. So Lindsay, I'm going to have you introduce yourself. But when you do, I need you to tell a story because I was reading your LinkedIn bio and there is a story on there about you bringing a briefcase to
Yeah.
kindergarten with
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
yes. Well, Lindsey Williams, as you said, I'm the VP of Marketing and Communications at Shoals. Deep history in the clean energy space with my career, all in marketing and communications roles for the most part. So across the value chain of a team, I've sort of done and experienced it all, which has been really fun, and it's brought me to where I am today. Yes, my mom growing up always used to tell me this story about me going to kindergarten with a briefcase. And people who know me are not surprised by that. I am the firstborn. I'm very type A. I don't sit often. I am a go-getter. So that also doesn't surprise me, and it's believable. I don't know if it was a real briefcase, but like the intent was for it to be a briefcase. I was ready to go.
What were you carrying? Just
I
like
mean,
whatever
most
you needed.
likely like a board book and like maybe some plastic keys. If I had to guess, this was pre-laptop, so I wouldn't have had one of those.
No, no.
Maybe a notebook. I don't.
That's awesome. No matter what, you wanted to be prepared. You had
I
stuff to do.
oh, that's full stop. That's exactly who I am.
I I understand. We have a lot, we have a lot of the same traits. So yeah, I completely
For
understand.
sure.
So let me introduce the topic for today's episode. So we talk a lot about behind the scenes growth. We talk about the messy parts of business and scale. And then ultimately, how do you fix that, right? So we go from like this crazy huge strategy down into kind of a little bit more of bite-sized chunks and then into details and what the team actually needs to do to hit that strategy. And of course, in there's a lot of opportunity for some miscommunication, for some tools and technologies that aren't necessarily meshing, for some people issues, for some processes. There's a lot in there that can happen. But there is one group that is very near and dear to my heart as well that typically seems to kind of be ahead of the curve when it comes to the rest of the company. So I'll call out the marketing team, and I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay to kind of talk about this a little bit more in terms of what you see with this. But the marketing team is really the tip of the spear when it comes to the company in general. They're the first ones to go to market. They're the first ones talking to customers, bringing in leads, and then filling the need as that customer goes down through the pipeline, right? So listening to what customer success is saying, listening to what operations is saying, product, whatever that is, and then implementing that into the marketing messaging to get better ICP messaging out there. So there's normally something that they're doing that's ahead of where everybody else is. And I think that's going to be polarizing to some folks, but I'll pause there and just say, what do you think, Lindsay?
Yes, I don't think this necessarily has to be polarizing, right? Because it takes all kinds and it takes all teams to build a successful business. And,
Yes,
saying
for
or
sure.
interpreting the fact that marketing seems to be ahead of that curve a bit doesn't mean we're better or worse than anybody else. It just, I think it's the unique position that marketing teams are in, right? We have a lot of stakeholders throughout the business. And in my experience, it feels like that's a unique team environment, right? We are talking to product managers, we're talking to engineers, we're talking to customer care, we're talking to sales. We're highly ingrained in the executive planning, right? Because we are sort of what you just said. We are the first people in front of the business who are talking to customers and gathering interest in your product, right? So
Right.
I think that positions us in a way that puts us as not reacting to business needs, but anticipating them because we can see sort of the long-term trajectory of where the problem's going to be or where the messaging is going to need to shift or how we're going to have to go about reaching our target audience better. And that's a great place to be if you're with a marketing team and it's okay to be ahead of the business, but it doesn't mean sales is not doing well. It doesn't mean operations is not doing well. It's just
No.
a symptom of where you are, right?
Yeah. Necessary, I feel like.
Yes, right,
The
necessary to do your job. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And I think the rest of the world kind of responds the same way, right? So I can't remember how many companies are actually in the MarTech stack
Mhm.
now. That crazy grid that keeps growing expansively,
Right.
exponentially every single year. But there just aren't that same level of technologies for the rest of the groups that we mentioned, right? There's
Yeah.
always something new that's churning out in terms of how to help marketing.
That's a really great point that I didn't even consider as part of this because you're right. We marketing teams are often seen as, the creative ones or the things that you see that are beautiful or like the really cheeky messaging, right? But
Right.
really, in reality, especially I would say over the last decade, marketing seems to be really entrenched in the data. All the things you just
Mhm.
said, all of these MarTech capabilities from profiling different customers to getting, ingrained in what those customers are looking for, to
Yeah.
understanding their buying patterns and who the buying groups are in each of these businesses, and also what they need to hear, how they need to be educated. And that data is something that's not really available to a sales team or to an operations team, right? They're sort of relying on us to be that filter and to understand what they all need to do to make the customer experience better. So it's a great point. I didn't think of that before.
Yeah, it was something I was thinking about as we were chatting about this topic earlier, and it's just a I guess it's a place of where, as you mentioned, place where marketing is. It's their job to do that because of just where they are in the line of everything. So, can you give me any examples of where your team is kind of leading the charge when it comes to some of these different areas?
Sure. I'm going to give an example from my previous role, actually,
Perfect.
at a big global
Anywhere.
developer, right? So we were, um, when I joined, the business was trying to consolidate under one shared sort of umbrella, right? So we were trying to get deeper into our customers and enable cross selling, right? Getting our different solutions in front of sort of the same audiences, right? So it made a lot of sense to sort of bring together these different business lines that were very much operating in silos before and needed to sort of have some level of connectedness in order to be successful in this new market, right? So um from a marketing standpoint, that strategy is very clear, right? You align under one brand, you align under a specific messaging set, you align under these product offerings instead of different business lines and promote your business as a sort of holistic shop, if you will, right? So
Mhm.
instead of going to company A, B, and C for these different needs, you come to us and we can support you through this transition. Um My team at the time was just agile and excited about this and sort
Yeah.
of ready to get dirty. And, step one was sort of bringing 3 or 4 different websites together under one brand. And that was like,
Woo.
anyone who's done a website project, and I feel like I'm glutton for punishment because everywhere I go, I feel like I do a website project, but it is a
Okay.
ton of work, but it's rewarding, right? So you get sort of that reward benefit off of it. And we jumped right in. We designed this whole, customer experience through this website. We had beautiful content and, it was SEO optimized, like all the things you think about when you're trying to make a digital footprint. Um, Unfortunately, we were ahead of everybody else, right? There was still a lot of people in different supporting teams, whether that be sales or delivery or operations, that were very um connected to their old brand and business line. So we
Mhm.
really had to sort of bring them along in the journey, right? We like had to meet them there and get them to understand the value and the benefit of what the team was trying to push for the customer
Right.
and give them sort of the space to get comfortable with that, right? Because in marketing things change all the time. We are very good at change management. At least that's been my experience with teams, right? We
Agreed.
understand that things are going to change constantly. We do A/B testing, we change up our look, we change up our feel, we change up our messaging. It's no big deal to us, but to other teams it is a big deal. So
Exactly.
we had to give them some space to come along, and it took a very long time, Sam. It took a very, very long time. And I think at the end, we were only able to show the value of that through the results, right? Through
Yeah.
understanding that because we took this path, we're able to fill the sales pipelines better. We have more meaningful opportunities. We have better customer stickiness because they're coming back to us for more things. And in the B2B world, that's not always easy, right? And it's
No.
challenging. So it was a good argument at the end, but we were probably 9 months ahead of everybody,
Yeah. I mean, at least, right? And
at least.
you mentioned change management, and one of my favorite things, because it can be frustrating to marketing team, well, to all teams, but it can be frustrating to marketing teams too when they're kind of running, right? Running as fast
Mhm.
as they possibly can, and they sometimes feel like they're dragging people along, giving people the space. And so I will remind my teams that saying something one time is not enough. Saying something twice isn't enough. Sometimes 3 or 4 times isn't enough. When they start saying it back to you is when you know that you're successful. So whatever that
Yep.
message is, yeah, whatever that message is, that's when they say it back to you. So I would set that expectation early with my team to say, look, you're going to have a training, you're going to have 10 trainings. Until they say it back to you, that is when you can stop. That's it. And it's change management, I think, is handled really well by marketing, but it does take time for sure.
Simplicity and repetition is the key to success when it comes to communication. So 100% I relate to sort of 10x, and having them say it back to you is that's when you know you did it.
This example is so ridiculous just because of now what we think is completely different. But this was only 2018. So we're not talking all that
Yeah.
long ago. And I was implementing Drift with my marketing team. We were putting it on the website. Drift had just come out in Boston and it was a big deal. My team was also within the same geography. So they heard about it at a trade show and really wanted to try it out. So we were implementing it. And we implemented in a few different areas, one of which was obviously lead generation. Yes, we're interested in hearing more about your product or using that solution. And then the other area was support. And when we tried to get the support team on board with having even just a basic chat flow, the response from the head of support at the time was people don't go to the website for support. I'm not joking. I am absolutely not joking. It was such a fractured internal environment that there was a support portal. Well, a lot of teams have that, right? There's a support portal,
Okay.
but the way that you got there was through the website. But people who were in charge of customer support believed that people just clicked on the support portal and went right through, that they didn't go to the quote marketing website for support.
The
And
marketing
so
website that I love.
marketing website for support. And this is I'm can't make this stuff up. And so I actually asked the head of digital at the time who worked on my team to put support in the button. They asked us not to do it, but I said put support there and just see how many times it was clicked in a given month. It was the number one clicked thing about
No,
asking for support by far,
no
like
doubt.
10x everything else. And I was just like, "See, that's a great example." So it took us about a year though before
I'm
that
sure.
particular team did end up having a chat on the website. And this is one thing, something simple. Now we think of
And
it as
that doesn't
simple.
even like enter your mind when you think of all the things that marketing is responsible for, right? Like that is
Yeah.
such a small piece of it. And if you can't even get that across the line and get people to understand the benefit and the value of doing it in a different way, I mean, that's an uphill battle right there. And I feel for
Yep.
people because I understand what that can look like, right? If you don't have that level of integration with your broader teams, it's going to be very difficult to get anything done.
Yes. And like I said, that was 2018. So
Yeah, well,
and to be fair, I was also the first, digital leadership hire that they had in
um,
that particular company, so there was a lot of kind of change management and adjusting and things like that, but that is still my favorite example of a
so
way
good.
that marketing was ahead of the curve, and now it's second nature. We use chat all the time,
Mhm.
for all different scenarios and things, and now AI taking it to a
Yeah,
completely
nobody wants
different.
to talk to a human, right? Unless you're doing this.
No. Exactly, having coffee and
Yeah,
doing this
right.
and all of those things. So we alluded to it a little bit earlier about the fact that when marketing is or ahead of the other areas, that there can sometimes be some friction. Other groups are trying to catch up. So how do you work in a way where marketing can be ahead, can be agile, and then not kill momentum when deals come across the line or you're turning leads over to sales or any other way that marketing interacts with those groups? How can you do that?
Yeah, it's a tough balance to strike, right, Sam? It's you can't wait for them to catch up because then you miss all this opportunity, right? And particularly in B2B, your sales cycle can be really long. So if you wait, you're setting yourself up for a much longer period of time until you recognize that revenue from those folks that you're, marketing to on the front end. So it is not an easy thing to do. I think what I've seen work well is empathy, to
Not
be frank, right? The first thing, understanding that these other teams who depend on you may not realize that they depend on you, and you have to make sure that they understand the value of your team and the value of the work that you're doing, but
for
not in
sure.
an aggressive way, right? Because that can
Right.
easily escalate into something that's a stale relationship between the two of you, and that's never going to work, right? So you have to approach it from their perspective and understand that on their to-do list, there's 40 things, right? They got to call this
Well,
person back. They got to close this deal. They're waiting for legal to approve a contract. Their boss is on them about their quotas, right? So this is not their primary job, and you don't want it to be, right? You want to
right.
be someone who helps them instead of inhibits them. So it's making that sort of connection in their head that if I lean into this, if I sort of support what is going on the marketing side, it's going to make my job easier in the long run, right? This is going to
Yes.
be a good thing in the long run, and I need to invest in that. So that's part of what I've seen. Additionally, I think we have to prove it, right? And this isn't new for marketing teams. And
Yeah.
we just talked about the data
No.
side of it. It's not new, but you'd be surprised. Like I have gone into businesses where there hasn't been a super mature marketing function, right? And the expectations of marketing are pretty low. And to me, that's like a great challenge. I'm like, okay, you can expect me to do a good PowerPoint, like, maybe update the logo. Sure, that sounds great. But like, there's all these other things that I can do to make your job easier, whether you're in sales or customer care or operations, by just doing my job well, right? So
Mhm.
making
Yeah.
that connection, making them understand the benefit of that connection, not just with words and beautiful things, but with real data to show how you've impacted the business all along, I think is really critical to said earlier to either like pulling them along or nudging them along, like whatever phrase you want to use, you got to do that with those two things, in my experience.
Mhm. So I'm going to throw out a one-liner that I will absolutely never forget because it hit me so hard when the CEO said it to me. And I'm interested in getting your reaction given what we just talked about with data and all the different things that you can do. And so I had just gotten done reporting this beautiful quarter worth of results, MQLs, deals open, all these things. And he looked at me and he said, Sam, marketing can't win if no one else is winning. If the business is not winning, marketing is not winning. My numbers were up, no one else's numbers were up. How is that possible?
Mm,
How do you react to that
I
statement?
mean, talk about controversial, right? Like the
Oh
inner
yeah.
inner me wants to scream a little bit. Um, I think, I think there's an element of accuracy in there, right? Marketing is a leading indicator of how things are going, right? So if your team is performing well in a business that generally is struggling to scale, I think that that is a good sign. But
Yeah.
he's right in the fact that we can't be successful without everybody else, right? We are the tip of the
Right.
spear. It's got to flow through in a strategic and efficient way. And it comes back to what I just said, right? Like making sure other teams, you kind of, one thing I always say to my teams when we're up against something like this, which frequently you are, is that
Mhm.
we're only as good as everybody else, right? So like we can
Yeah.
do all this great work, we can do all this great stuff, but it's going to fall on deaf ears if everybody else is sort of dropping the ball. So how do
Mhm.
we become sort of the enabler of the rest of the
Mhm.
business, right? How do we market ourselves across all of these teams so that they understand that if they do this XYZ, they're going to be successful in their business too, right? So I gotta say, I kind of agree with him, but I think it's more nuanced than that. I think it's a good sign that marketing is performing well. I think it's a sign that sales are going to come and operations is going to fulfill those sales and customer care is going to be great at what they do. Because if you start that process well, it should end well, right? You just have to be the enabler of that.
Exactly. I completely agree with everything you said. And I have after it obviously me being the leader of that team and that statement at that point in time was a little like, whoa, how do I respond
On.
to this? Yeah. But now that I've had some time away from it, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I agree.
Yeah.
And I wish I could go back and say, I agree with you. But again, marketing being a leading indicator, we have some work to do and marketing can help some of the other places, some of the other teams do it, right? That's where some of the business and the politics come into play. But that is what this Scale Without Chaos podcast is all about is how to do the handoffs between the teams, how to build up the processes, how to build up the people, how to build up the system to be at the point where marketing is.
Mhm.
Or to whatever that leading group is. It could be product, it could be customer success, it could be anyone. Project managers, they're always great for process as well, right?
Mhm.
Teams. Whatever that lead group is, how do you ultimately take whatever learnings that they have that have worked for your company and turn that into something that is going to help you grow and scale? Because if there's a bottleneck, even if it's a small one, like support doesn't want to implement drift, how do you keep that going and how do you follow each of those threads all the way to the end? And how
Yeah.
do you make it?
It's a great question, right? And one that I think is largely different across different businesses, right? Because you have
Mhm.
different levels of sophistication. I think automation might be a great example, right? In marketing,
Right.
we become very accustomed to automation, right? We trust it, we rely on
Mhm.
it, we play around with it, right? We uncover new ways of reaching target audiences in a seamless way. Customer care is a great example. They don't have that, right? They're getting a
Yeah.
ticket, they're responding in real time, their messaging may or may not be aligned every time. They may or may not be giving the same answers because they're human and they're just responding to somebody, right? So,
Mhm.
looking at how systems can help with that, right? Like marketing automation systems can be used outside of marketing, right? They can be used
Right.
in customer care function. They could be used in a sales function. They could be used to support some of these time consuming tasks that we all have to alleviate them to think more strategically, to think more broadly, to focus on change management, things like that, right? So
Yeah.
it's about, and maybe that's on us, Sam, right? Maybe we're
Right.
not communicating
Yeah.
well, that we have these sort of secret strategies and secret tools that help us be very good at our job that can also be helpful for other people. And
Mhm.
it's something I've in my past have tried, and I would say I wouldn't give us 100% on
Yeah.
our results on it, but it has helped particularly customer care teams in supporting their responses, right? To help them not have to type out a unique response every single time. So
Okay.
maybe it's partly us. Maybe we're not speaking up enough because, we're maybe not at the right meetings or not at the right table or
Could
not
be.
given the same sort of level of respect is not the right word, but maybe um I don't know, I'm blanking on it. It's consideration maybe to
Yeah.
understand like how we can help the rest of the business. And again, that depends on your company, right? Depends on how, supportive your leadership team is. And, I've frankly been very lucky on that side of it. I've had a lot of leadership support throughout my career, but not everybody
Okay.
has that. Not every business has
Yeah.
that.
No. And that's really one of the shifts that I'm hoping, well, this is gonna be, like, years down the road, but that's what I'm really hoping to see is that I have so much respect for executives, for team leaders who are really honed in on their craft, right? Whether or not it's customer success, marketing, product, IT, doesn't matter to me, but people who are really looking to improve themselves, improve their team, it's amazing. But what's really missing are the executives who see across all of the different all of the different pieces of the business and think about what that is. Like, how could those things interlock? What is the best thing for the business and how could we pull these things together? And it could be anything. I keep using the word things, but it's really people, process, and systems. Like
Yeah,
anything that has to do with your business. It's okay, well, this worked really cool over here, but hey, maybe this would work really well over in product if we used it in this way. And so I think I'll take um some of the maybe it's us thing off a little bit and say, maybe it is not being at the right table, but it's also everyone's kind of I use the analogy of sprinting on different treadmills, right? Everybody's sprinting
great
as
one.
hard as they can on different treadmills. And unless you have really good cross-functional communication around what's happening and what the details are, you never hear about the details from other teams, partially sometimes because of politics and everyone's like, "No, I got my own spot. We're doing really good. No one really needs to too many cooks in the kitchen. We don't need that." But also partially because you don't really I mean, you've got your own stuff that you're focusing on.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a matter of everybody getting into the details of everybody else's stuff and saying, "Yeah, this is how we've improved it over here. Would this be helpful for you too?" It's just a level that most cross-functional groups don't get to, but maybe would solve a lot of issues.
It's a really great point. When you mention, you feel for leadership teams, of course, like the things that they're dealing with are beyond, anything that, someone in digital marketing is concerned about, right? So I
Yeah.
do also have empathy for it. It's interesting because I read this study the other day, and the long and short of it was only 7% of CEOs have marketing experience. And I think that's really clear, right?
Wait, say that
Yes.
again, Lindsay?
Seven
Say that again.
7% of CEOs have marketing experience.
Oh, okay.
Most come from finance, right? Which is
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah.
With 7% have marketing experience. And I think that is a blind spot in a lot of ways because of all the things we've just talked about, how integrated a marketing team is across a business and how cross-functional that they have to be in order to get their job done. I think,
Mhm.
you know, the table, again, the sort of advice you can give your leadership team, the managing up is really important. So, yes,
Oh,
I completely agree with you. Yes.
yeah. Oh my gosh, all of it. Yeah. Um, so I guess the last kind of question that I'll throw at you is the stereotypical advice question, which Um, I don't love, but that's all right. Okay. All right. So we'll do one last question and then we'll wrap it up and I'll let you go. But this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today, Lindsay. It's always a pleasure. So thank you.
Been very fun.
So if someone today feels like they're ahead of their company, like we're marketing or we're it doesn't matter, you can be whatever group you want, but we're this group and we're kind of dragging everybody else along and no one else is seeing what we're seeing, what would your advice to them be?
I'd probably have two things, right?
Mhm.
Talk to your peers, talk to people in other businesses. You don't have to go at them with a deck and say, this is why I think you should sign on to this or catch up to me.
I would highly recommend you don't
Yeah,
do
no,
that.
just leave the deck at home, right? Like leave the deck. We're
Yeah.
all tired of decks, right? Leave them at home. Just have a conversation. What are you struggling with? Try to understand maybe why they're not coming along with you or why they're behind. And I think in most cases, you'll find that there could be a simple solution or a way that you can sort of align on a more even playing field, right? Without
Mhm.
drastically changing anything you're doing. Um,
Okay.
the second thing would always be I said this earlier, but managing up is so important, right? If you
Mhm.
are seeing these things across the business and it doesn't feel to you that the executive team is or your boss is even, have a conversation with them too. Manage up, tell them what you're seeing, give them an insight into the across the business because honestly, Sam, not everyone's honest about what they're struggling with. And
No.
it's not a this is where everything's broken conversation. This is where
Mhm.
I think we can be better conversation, right? This
Mhm.
is where I think I can help or my team can help. Or, a little bit of enablement might go a long way, right? Like maybe we focus on that. So I think
Mhm.
it coming from a place of empathy, which I said before, so having direct conversation, also making sure that leadership sees how well integrated a marketing team is and how much that they can support in this sort of scaling process. And, not everybody sees that. So sometimes you got to bring it up.
For sure. And I think you're right. It's not pointing fingers. It's here's what's on the table.
Yeah.
Here's what we have to go get.
Yes.
And it's up to us to get it. So let's figure out a way ultimately to get there. So pretty
Yes.
simple,
Exactly.
actually. Solid advice. Well, again, Lindsay, thank you so much for being here. If this episode is something that hit home for you, please scale. Please, I will finish this out. I can't do my intros and outros today. They're awful. These are awful. I'm gonna leave that in though, so that everyone knows that I am human, and it's really hard to do intros and outros the same way consistently.
Marketing,
But
we're just like you, you know?
yeah, we sincerely are.
Right.
But anyway, subscribe to Scale Without Chaos. There will be more like this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.